Y'all doing okay this
Good.
morning?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, good. Jadea, are you there? I was going to ask how your mama is. Is she okay? She come through the surgery all right yesterday? Okay.
I was going to get all showered and all purdy for you guys, but then I thought they won't be able to tell the difference.
Look, you'd be surprised. I see that speck of dirt behind your ears.
Yeah, it's more than a speck.
Oh, goodness.
How many you have in here, Margaret?
There are 13 on the roster. We have 2 MIAs and a couple that are often late arriving, but are there in spirit. So we should be able to get started here in the next couple of minutes. Let me talk about a couple of things while we're waiting. Welcome to Zoom. I'm hopeful this is going to be a better choice for us. Of course, I signed on this morning and it said I didn't have any meetings pending, and I was like, I know I do. I've invited, 15 people to a meeting this morning. There's one pending somewhere. Be sure, Dr. Davies is with us this morning because WordPress sometimes gives people difficulty. And it's real important that you be able to get me directly to your blog rather than to a sign-in page, so that I have to stand on my head and put in a password and all that kind of jazz in order to get to your blog. So he's going to go over a couple of things just real quick, and he'll answer any questions if you have them about how to set up your WordPress page to make it work the best way possible. Okay. The other things, on your canvas under the items you will use again and again, you will use and reuse module, I put in a handout that I usually hand out in class that has a bunch of who, what, when, where, why, and how questions. And we're going to talk today about sourcing and interviewing and that sort of thing. So I think it'll come in real handy, but you don't have to use it per se, but it is something that'll give you some suggestions of how to go about asking certain questions and how to go about getting information from your sources once that process starts. Okay. So those are just 2 little blurbs. We will, as soon as we get everybody here, we'll talk more about the style test this afternoon. And please, if you haven't already done so, send me your blog address and your Twitter handle. Just put it in an email and send it to me so I can see if I can get to it. What I'm planning on doing is checking your blogs this weekend and just giving you some feedback so that you can go ahead and really get started on that. And if you're making any mistakes, you won't be making them any longer and that sort of thing. Okay. Dave, I don't want to hold you up too long. If you want to go ahead and just sort of talk a little bit about WordPress and all that, that'd be great. And I'm recording, I think. Let me make sure I am. Yes, I'm recording.
Okay.
And so this should be available for anybody who comes in late to check up on once they get here, or maybe later today. So if y'all have not set up your blog already, or you don't have a clue as to how to start, this is the time to ask. Okay.
Okay. All right. Can I give a little pep talk first?
Sure.
Okay, y'all, I was a French major back in college. Look where it got me. I've always wanted to learn Spanish. So right now I'm in a 300 level Spanish course. And I started reading this week about some kind of poem that dates to the 10th century. And I'm thinking to myself, what the heck have I gotten myself into? Um, and but one of the advantages of being a French major is that I remember that stuff that really threw me for a loop early on, after just exposure to it for a while, it gets easier. So what I would say to you in taking reporting this summer is just like, I mean, I'm telling you, I've had a language before, and I'm not God's gift to foreign languages, believe you me. I love it, but I'm not great at it. I'm pretty good at it. Point being that experience has shown me that it's going to get easier, and so I'm just trying not to freak myself out. And that's what you all need to remember as you go into a reporting and writing course. I can't tell you the number of students over the years who've said to me, man, I'm not cut out for this. Well, I mean, you wouldn't expect to show up on your first day in a 300 level Spanish course and speak fluently. You shouldn't expect to know all this stuff as you get started. So if this seems tough at first, hang in there. It gets easier, okay? And it gets easier for practice, just like it'll get easier for me back in the course that I'm taking. So I always tell my classes this, and I'm thanks to Margaret for indulging me and telling you all this. The other thing is that this is not a class you just need to get through and then go to the next thing. The skills you're doing in this class, you're going to use forever in your careers. So it's something you really need. So it's a craft and a skill that you will hone by practice, and it gets better over the course of your work. And you'll be a completely different writer and reporter a year from now than you are right now. And 2 years from now, you won't recognize the you that, you know, is sitting here in June 2020. So just keep that in mind. The other thing I wanted that Margaret asked me to do was to kind of go over a little bit of stuff on WordPress. So I'm just going to show you. Well, first, I'm mindful of the need for social distancing. So I thought I'd put on my mask while I share my screen because I don't want you guys to get sick. Maggie, it says host disabled attendee screen sharing. If you go down to security, you can click up to let me share also. I don't have security on mine, but I'm thinking you have security on yours at the bottom, right next to participant.
I think I just did that.
Oh, you did? Okay, now I'll try it again.
Okay.
Okay, now I can share. Thank you.
Okay.
All right. What I'm going to do is just show you a few things about this. You know, before I do, let me ask you, how many of you guys have already started on your blog? Do you have you run into any issues? What's your comfort level with WordPress? You're okay? Okay, I'm just going to show y'all a couple of the things that I've seen mess students up. So if it hadn't messed you up, more power to you. But this is just something to know about. Okay, hold on. Let me share the screen. Thought y'all would laugh more at my mask. That's the last doggone joke I'm going to tell. Okay, hold on. All right, if you get to, okay, y'all can see my screen, right? Okay, here's WordPress. The main thing you need to do, and if you're going to write down one thing, well, write down my birthday is August 20th. You know, it's coming up. Y'all can go in together for a gift. No need to buy one individually. You need to write down this one thing. Go to, you know, up here in your menu, go under design to customize. Just remember design, customize. Write that down. Design, customize. Okay. And if you customize, you're going to have the option to customize all kinds of stuff. Now, a lot of this is optional, but y'all, you may think that WordPress is clunky and gosh, couldn't I just use Wix or one of those? No. And the reason you don't want to use Wix or one of those is that you're not going to be using Wix if you get to a PR job day after tomorrow. You're going to be using a content management system, something like WordPress. WordPress powers like 60% or 65, I can't remember the percentage, of all websites on the internet. So you need to understand this. One, because it dominates this space, and second, because most content management systems are like this. you're not going to be using Wix in the real world, more than likely. You're going to be using WordPress or something very much like it. Okay, the thing that you really need to remember, what did I say? You go to Customize, and then go to Homepage Settings. Y'all are doing blogs. You're not doing a static page. So let's look for a minute. Here's, hold on. Here's my beautiful web page. Actually, I've got a problem with it I have to fix. daviddavies.org. This is a static page. It doesn't change. If you go today, that's there. If you go tomorrow, that's there. It doesn't change. Okay? But you guys are not doing a static page like my page. You are doing a blog. So make sure that when you go to Homepage Settings, it says your latest posts, not a static page. Got it? Because sometimes people will go in and create the blog posts, but then they won't show up. Well, that's because you have a static page written instead of your latest posts. Got it? All right. Now, here's a page that, oh, wait. Let's show you one other thing. So here's the other stuff. Y'all can fiddle with these yourselves and see what they do, but you really need to understand menus. Now look there. Can y'all see my menu? Y'all can see what my cursor's doing. This is my menu. Look, I created a page called Maggie and Drugs. Isn't that funny? It's a really long page. Just, you can draw your own conclusions. Okay, so look, y'all know what this is, right? This is the name of my page, One-Eyed Cat Lovers Are You. These are the internal menu pages for my blog, right? Up and down for yes. I know y'all have your mics turned off, which is good, best practice, but y'all understand this. Okay, I was able to put this menu here by going to, now y'all remember where I am, Customize, Menus, and then click on the menu, Primary, and see, look, there's the menus that I put there. Now let's say Maggie has given up drugs, very unlikely. But if she does, if I want to take that out of this page, I can't, let's see if I can figure it out. I don't want to delete the whole menu. I can't figure it out. But let's say I like it better down here. I can move it here, and you see how she moved over here. So I can reorder, and I can also delete. I can also add items. So more than likely, what you're going to find is you'll have something that WordPress has put there as a default, and then you can add a menu by hitting Add Items. So you have Add Items, and then I get to pick from pages that I've already created. You see? Now, it's not jumping out at me how to delete one of the, oh, wait. Did you see that? Under Primary, once I got something that had an X, you're going to be able to figure out how to delete that. Now, don't hit Delete Menu. That deletes the whole menu. Okay, you got it? All right. Now, keep in mind, if I want to add an item, I have my choice. Y'all understand the difference between a post and a page? A page is a static page like this. This is my home page. It doesn't change. Okay? A post is a blog post, which WordPress by default shows you the most recent blog post. Okay, now I'm going to pause just a second. Turn your mic. If you have a question, raise your hand and then turn on your mic. If you seem to understand, have any of you had problems with this? So y'all all have it. Okay, you got it? All right. Okay, just explore this. You can add all the sites you want. So create a second site. So here's a new site that I'm going to create, and I'm going to put it on WordPress. Create a site. Well, no, they're trying to sell me a domain. I don't want a domain. Let's go back to my sites. What I suggest doing is adding a new site and playing with that one. And that way, you know, if you mess something up, it doesn't matter. So create a new site and call it Pickles or something, and mess with that. Okay. All right. I have one more thing I want to tell you guys. Now look, here I am in the standard WordPress interface. Here I have my site. Okay. Now look, Maggie's going to want the URL of your site, right? Okay. You're going to want to go up here, but look at this. Well, I'm not showing, it's not getting bigger. Can you see this link? It says wordpress.com/home, blah, 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 blah. Okay, wait a second. Let me show something else. Just bear with me. You have to be careful when you send Maggie your URL that it's the URL of your actual page. If you don't watch it, when you click up here, you'll get an internal link to WordPress, because y'all all know this is a cloud-based system. And if you don't watch it, you will send her an internal link that will not work. So that's what Maggie meant when she said you got to be careful for which link you're sending her. So the way to do it, I think you go to my site, and then always, y'all all have multiple browsers, right? You probably have Safari, you probably have Chrome. Is that right? Okay, so when you get your link, go to home, go to my site, and then open it in another browser to see if it works. And then look, this is making me set up some stuff. Make sure that you go through all the setup processes to make it complete. You have to confirm your email address. If you don't confirm your email address, I think your site will not actually go live. Okay, what questions do y'all have?
Can you show them where to get the free site? Because remember, sometimes they want you to buy a site.
That's right. Okay, let's do that. Let's go through a new site, y'all, and make it, give us free. Okay, so I go here, create a shiny new WordPress site. I click Start Now. I don't really want a domain, but I'm gonna put sour pickles. All right, and look, I get sour. They're trying to sell me a domain and all this stuff. Y'all with me so far? But here I have the option to get sour pickles, whatever, for free. Now, I don't want all those words, so I want it to be Dave's Sour Pickles, okay? So I don't want the one with all those numbers in it. So it gave me the option of davesourpickles.wordpress.com. So then I click select here. Once again, they want to try to sell me something. Let's see. Now this is where I'm going to have to think, Maggie.
Up at the top. Not sure yet. Start with the free site.
Oh, thank you. Up at the top. You should teach this stuff. Not sure yet. Start with a free site. Go there. And then it's going to set me through a site. Now look here. All right, so I've got my site. First thing I'm going to do, are y'all with me? I want this to be a blog, not a static site. I go to Design, Customize, Homepage Settings. See, it defaults to a static page. So you're going to be putting all these blog items and nobody can see it. So I'm going to change that to your latest posts. Be sure to save pages and then go back. Now look at this. They gave me a menu, blog, home, blog, about, contact. Those are 4 pages. So if I go here to pages, let's see, I got to find site, and then I get pages. There, if I could just go in and edit all of those. So go into contact and put all your contact information. Welcome to your WhatsApp. I don't want all this. Add content. Get started. Blah blah blah. Okay, I could go in and create all of this. Now look, this is just boilerplate stuff. So click edit, edit, and then go in over here and edit accordingly. Okay. All right. So you've done that. Now you'll notice here, I'm going to have to put in my site. Then remember what I told you about menus? Okay, go back down to customize. Go to menus. I can add a social menu at the bottom. That must be something here that's going to tell me, you know, social sites I can go to. Here's my primary. There's the stuff here. Let's say I don't want this. I still haven't figured out how to delete that, but y'all can figure it out. Remove. I just want about, home, and blog. So I just removed that. Y'all see how I did it? I clicked down on page, and then I found the remove here. So if it were me, I would set up a play site and muck with it a little bit and get comfortable with it. I'm telling you, if you can do Word, you can make this happen. Now notice under setup, it won't go live, I think, and well, this was my second one, so it's not going to make me do my address. All right, last but not least, see here under my home, go to view site. That's my address. Dave Sourpickles WordPress.com. Did y'all see that? I go to my home, view site. That's my address. DaveSourpickles.wordpress.com. Now, if I try to go to the menu bar, I mean, whatever the heck that's called, the URL site. If I'm here on pages and I'm looking at my blog and I say, oh, I'm going to send this blog to Maggie. If I click up here, it says WordPress.com, something, 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 something. That's not your link. Your link is site name, WordPress.com. And then lastly,
How to publish.
Wait, publish?
Yeah.
Oh,
Publish.
good, Maggie. All right, so here I am. I've got my blog, site title, blah, blah, blah. How do I publish, Maggie? Remind me.
I can't remember either. I always rely on you.
Yeah, well, that's your demise. Let's see. Well, let's see if it's published already. Here's the site, Dave's Sour Pickles, WordPress.com. I always open the site in a different browser. So I'm going to go over here. There's my cat. Look at that pretty cat. Can you tell she only has one eye? So don't ask her to read your homework for you. Dave's Sour Pickles. See if it opens. It's not opening, is it? Yeah. Okay. So I still need to make it live. Okay. Let's see if we can figure this out together. Who can tell me how to make this site live? Anybody?
It says your site hasn't launched yet, so there's got to be a button somewhere where you launch it.
Okay. All right. So let's go to my home. Site has been created. We'll guide you through setting up and launching. Let's get started. Let's name my site. My site is here. So I'm just going to follow their menu. Sour Pickles. All done. Continue. Every time you make a change, it needs to be saved. Save changes. Good job. Your chance. Let's move on and see what's next for our checklist. Return to my home. Add a menu. We're going to skip that because we already have that. Now we have to do launch site.
It's okay.
Let's launch site. Give your site an address. Again, they're trying to get me to pay things. I'm going to, wait. Maggie, we're going to have to.
Skip purchase, the last one.
Say it again. Skip purchase. Okay. And then continue with your free site.
And it says it's there. You launched your site.
So now it says it's there. Let's go to, now watch y'all. If I go up here, it still says wordpress.com/home, blah, 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 blah. That's not my address. My address is view site, davespickles.wordpress.com. So I copy that, move over to Chrome, Dave's Pickles, Dave Sour Pickles, and there it is.
Yay!
Okay, lastly, thanks for that, Maggie. I'd forgotten that. Lastly, y'all, you're going to look like a goober if you have all this standard stuff in here that says, you know, introduce yourself, example post, about, blah, 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 contact, blah, blah, blah. So don't make it live until you've gone in. At least have just a 2-item menu and have everything about you that's original, even if it's 1 paragraph long. But you're going to look like a goober if you go live and you have something that is template material that WordPress put up there. And keep in mind, this is a skill that each of you will use in a job someplace, I can guarantee you. So treat this as a piece of work that you want to really be proud of, because it's something that can benefit you beyond simply getting a grade for Maggie's class.
Well, and that's kind of, am I on? I can't remember. Yes, I am. That's kind of the point, is at this point, you're writing about real issues, and you may want to, if you do a good job on it, you may want to include this in your portfolio to show people that you can write about the economy or politics or whatever your topic is. So it might be a helpful tool for your portfolio too. So. All right. Any other questions? Thank you so much for coming today, Dave. I appreciate it.
No, I'm glad to do it. Anybody have any questions? Y'all feel good about this? Hey, Bree, I didn't say hi to you. How you doing? Okay, well, I'll let y'all do your stuff. And if you have any questions, oh, last thing, there's this cool thing called Google. It's really neat, google.com. If you have any issues with WordPress, you know, something stuck on the menu or whatever, just Google it. I mean, you'll find it in a heartbeat. So WordPress is pretty simple. There are all kinds of tutorials out there, like how to get started on a WordPress site and all that kind of stuff. Most of them are 5 or 6 minutes. So look at those if you have any follow-up questions. You're welcome to get in touch with me, but y'all can see this is really doable. You'll figure it out. Thanks, Maggie. Knock 'em dead today.
Thank you. I appreciate you coming.
Anytime. See you later.
See ya.
Bye.
Okay, guys. So you're all going to be WordPress experts now. Did that help? Was that helpful? Did that? Okay. One of the things that happens this first time when I'm going to check these this weekend just to make sure that I can get to them, first of all, and that you're writing it the correct way. Now, when I say correct way, what I mean is short, it has links, you're making sense, you're using good grammar, spelling, and punctuation, all that kind of stuff. I'm not going to be messing around with what you're saying at this particular point. I just mainly want to make sure that you're off to the right start, okay? And then for the rest of class, you'll be just doing it a couple of times a week to update it each week, okay? And then I'll check it again at the end of the semester, okay? Okay, so let's go ahead on. So send me your blog address and your Twitter handle so I can follow you and see what you're tweeting about. And I'll check both over the weekend. I told you that the who, what, when, where, why, and how questions are now on your Canvas page under items you will use and reuse in this class. Anybody have any questions about the leads assignment from last night? Nope. Okay. All right. Let's talk a couple of minutes about the style test this afternoon, just to make sure that you understand how that works. The test will open at 6 o'clock and it will close at 7 o'clock. That is Central Time. That is what we're on right now. Okay. So sometime between 6 and 7 o'clock, you'll need to go in and finish it. If you want to sign on right at 6, that gives you the entire hour to do it. You can use your AP style book. You know, some of the things you're going to recognize right out of the gate because you've been reviewing that. But what I would do between now and 6 o'clock is I would just kind of flip through A through L and look at some of the things that are listed there and how those are handled in AP style, and you'll be in better shape. Okay. So any questions about that? It will close at 7 o'clock. So if you run into a problem, let's say you decide to go get you some ice cream at 5 o'clock this afternoon, and you have a car incident. Maybe your car won't start when you come out of the ice cream shop. Shoot me an email and I'll deal with it on an individual basis. Okay. Okay, but everybody else should be through by 7 o'clock this evening. Okay,
Is it all multiple choice?
No, it is all sentences, and you'll be correcting them. You'll be writing them correctly.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Okay, good. So let's move on. Let's talk about sourcing a story. One of the things about news writing that is different from any other kind of writing is that the way you research it. You don't go to the library and go to the stacks and start looking through things. Instead, what you do is you talk to people and you use sources to give you the kinds of information that you need for the particular story that you are working at that particular point. Okay. If you've got your microphone on, if you turn it off, that'd be great. One thing that journalists know how to do is they know how to do research and find sources. Now, when I was coming up in the newspaper business, a lot of times what we would do is, you know, maybe a news situation came up. One of the good things about living in a town with 2 major universities and 2 junior colleges real close by is that you always had people who studied things. So if you were, I was a business writer for a long time. So one of the things that I was always looking at was, what are consumers doing? What are people spending their money on? What kind of things are going on in the employment area? And so I could call a professor over at USM or William Carey and say, I'm putting together a story about XYZ. And I was told that that's kind of your area of expertise. Could you help me with it? Let me give you the questions that I have to ask you. Okay. And most of the time, unless they were really busy or they were on their way to class, they were really cooperative and they would help me out with things. So living in a town like Hattiesburg is advantageous there. Sometimes you just don't know exactly where something fits. And that's when, you know, we can talk about it in class. I don't know who to call to find out about when the zoo is going to reopen. Well, okay, I do know who to call. So I can give you the name and you can look it up and talk to that person. Now, most of the time, your best bet for getting a good interview from anybody, and we're going to talk about interviewing in just a little while too, is to do it in person. And the reason is, there's a couple of 3 reasons, but the reason is because when you have someone in the same room with you, you can see more of what they are doing. If they are sitting over there rolling their eyes while you're talking to them, then you know that you are making them unhappy in some way, shape, or form. If you can see that they are over there, you know, fidgeting and, you know, walking around and all that kind of stuff, you can see that you've lost their attention. So one of the things that you want to do, if you can, I'm not going to ask you to put yourself in danger of coronavirus or any of that sort of thing, but one of the things you want to do, if you possibly can, is to try to do at least that first interview in the same room with that person, okay? And the reason for that is because that way you get the verbal and the nonverbals from their reaction to you. And also you can show them that you don't have two heads and you don't breathe fire. A lot of people are worried about the media. They think that the media are out to get them, and that they always have to be completely on their guard, or else they're going to get in trouble or something like that. Okay. And so you want to show them both that you are professional, that you are doing this as a class, for a class, but you are doing it to learn how to be a professional in this, and also that you really are interested in the information that they are giving you. So you too have to act interested. Now, I've been to many interviews where the person went on and on and on, and of course we live in the South, and lots of people like to go down all kinds of bunny trails while they're telling you whatever it is that they're telling you that will be helpful for your story. You're going to have to sift through all of that at the end of it. But this is the way that we gather information for our news stories, okay? To become a better journalist, there are a couple of things that you need to do first and foremost. Number one, you've got to decide the reason for talking to any source. If you're going to call somebody up to go fishing, I'm not sure this is the right person to talk to, you better be upfront with it. You need to be right up front. I'm not sure you're the person I need to speak with, but I was told you might be knowledgeable in this area, and I am looking for information about X, okay? So what you've got is you've got live sources, you've got people breathing, who you will look at and talk to, and you've got non-live sources. Those are things like books, websites, news programming, any of that sort of thing. So those are the two kinds of sources that you'll be using for your stories that we're going to be start writing next week. Next week. You're required to have at least 3 live sources in each one of them. That works out pretty well, because if you've got something that's somewhat controversial, look at what you got. You've got this side, you've got that side, and then you've got the person in the middle who's going to be your expert and is going to ride the middle of the road or stay on the fence, or whatever the case is, and sort of explain things between these two. How come this one's right? How come this one's right? This one, that's one of the jobs that this person's going to do. So 3 sources is going to be your minimum. 3 live sources is going to be your minimum for all of your stories. You can use 10 if that's what you need. Now that might make the story a bit long, but if you need 10 sources to make your story make sense, then that's what you should do. But you have to have at least 3 live sources, okay? What you do with these sources is you interview these people and you ask them questions. Now, this is all kind of related to each other, but we'll sort of jump back and forth between interviewing and sourcing here. You ask them questions so that you can build the story. Sometimes you're going to know what's going on. You're going to know that the mayor and 2 of the aldermen don't like each other, and that they generally disagree about everything, okay? But you can't assume anything. You're going to need to talk to the mayor and say, now, Mayor Barker or Mayor Jones or Mayor Smith, whatever his name is, or her name is, you and Alderman Perkins and Alderman Simpson don't ever get along on things. Where are y'all on this, in this situation? And the mayor might say, well, that's not true. Mr. Perkins helps bring in outside information because that's his job. He's the alderman at large. And Mr. Simpson has long been someone who studies mankind, and so he often thinks outside the box. So I'm always glad to hear from him. Okay, so now you've got his reason behind these things. Okay, you may be able to use that for your story or not. You ask questions. Good place to start. Who, what, when, where, why, how. Okay, if you get those questions answered, what have you done? You've pretty much got your story started, because those are the questions that any good news story is going to ask. Now, just like when you're talking to your friend about what they did last weekend, things are going to pop up. Okay, someone's going to say something, and you're going to say, wait a minute, what do you mean by that? Or can you elaborate on that a little bit, or things of that nature. So what I tell students to do is, remember your science classes where you had to make hypotheses? Remember what a hypothesis was? Who knows what a hypothesis is? What is it, Judea? Tell me what it is. Turn your microphone on. There you go.
Educated guess.
Yeah, it's an educated guess. You're going to have sort of an educated guess about every story that you do. You're going to think, okay, this looks like a good story right now because we're coming out of the coronavirus pandemic, and we're moving into people going out again. Wonder how that's going to work. I think people are going to be anxious about it at first, but once they get out and go to a restaurant or a retail store or some place that they haven't been in a while, they're probably going to relax a little bit and be a little bit more willing to get out as time goes on. Okay, that's what I think is going to happen. Now I'm going to ask those questions so I can prove my hypothesis, or I can disprove my hypothesis. You see what I'm saying? So that you're not going in with the assumption that this is a done deal. Sometimes things are, but you're not going in with that assumption. You're going in with the idea that I'm going to ask the appropriate questions and I'm going to get answers from them. Okay? Now, once you get your list of questions together and you establish the time to have this interview, you're going to want to take notes. Okay? Every time you go to anywhere, no matter what platform you're writing for, you're going to want to take notes. Okay. The reason for that is that if you use some sort of recording device, trust me, that is exactly the time that those batteries are going to run out of gas. Okay. If you are using your memory, something's going to happen and you're going to forget that information. So writing things down is the best way to keep up with them. Bear in mind that if you are going to talk to a coach on the side of a football field and it is pouring down, your pen is not going to work. You're going to need a pencil. Keep your tools of the trade there with you at all times. I don't have one right here in front of me, but a lot of news organizations give their reporters what we call a reporter's pad, and it's a flip. It's got this kind of a top to it, and it flips so that you can easily turn the pages as you are writing. Okay, but you definitely want to write things down. There are 3 kinds of quotes that you're going to get from your sources: direct quotes, indirect quotes, and partial quotes. Okay, direct quotes are exactly what so-and-so said in exactly those words. You do not change a word of it. Years ago, there used to be a mayor here in Hattiesburg, and he's since passed on. He was a great guy. Everybody loved him. He got reelected 2 or 3 times. But he was country as country was. I mean, his grammar was not particularly good. His way of putting sentences together was pretty unique. And there was always that temptation to kind of clean him up a little bit. But think about it. Why did the people of Hattiesburg elect him? Did they elect him because he had perfect grammar and spelling and punctuation? Probably not. They elected him because he was a good guy. And if you cleaned up his act for him, the voters out there knew that you were doing something to his pros because he didn't sound like himself. Okay. So when you are quoting someone directly, you quote the exact words that he or she says, and you put those quotations completely in quotation marks. Okay. Now you'll remember from your grammar that in the United States of America, all of the punctuation for a quote goes inside the quotation marks. That is not true in Great Britain and elsewhere in Europe, but it is true in the United States. So if you are saying, I am going to the store after class today, comma, close quotes, Maggie Williams said, okay? That's how that works, okay? So be careful with that, okay? Indirect quotes is also called paraphrasing. This is where you have the opportunity to simplify something that someone has said in a direct quote, but you're not going to change the meaning of it. My favorite example that I always use here is about the time I had to go cover a polymer science lecture. Okay, I got to the office one morning, somebody had called in sick, and so they said, can you go out and cover this lecture? And I said, sure. So I went out and I covered the lecture. I had no idea what polymer science was. I did not know. I hoped that I was going to find out in the course of this hour-long lecture. Most of the people in the room were familiar with polymer science. I was the only newbie to the bunch. So I took copious notes. And at the end of the session, I went up to the speaker and I said, Mr. Speaker, my name is, I work for, and I'm afraid that I'm kind of behind here. I don't know what a polymer is. Could you help me with that understanding? And he looked at me a minute and he said, well, ma'am, a polymer is a bunch of monomers linked together. And I guess my eyes got big and I looked a little, because at that point he said, let's sit down, let's talk about this, let's see what we do. And what happened was I came to understand that polymers were the things that put the chewy in chewing gum. They were the things that made molecules stick together so that when you when you waxed a floor, you had a pretty shine there. They were in a lot of plastics, and they helped pull the plastics together so that when you took a water bottle and you drank out of it, it didn't have a bunch of holes in it, okay? So a lot of times taking that kind of information and simplifying it for yourself first, and then for your audience, makes it more understandable. Now, do you need direct quotes from people in your news stories? Of course you do. But paraphrasing information is the way to get from the direct quotes to the end of the story, okay? And sometimes you're going to paraphrase more than others because sometimes it's really complex information, that your audience needs to know. So paraphrased material is not included in quotation marks, but it does have to be cited from who it came. Okay, so if you go to cover a speech that Dr. Bennett makes, and you give a couple of complete quotes that he says, but then you want to give the middle parts that tell how he came to the decision to make us come back to school on August the 17th and get out at Thanksgiving, and what that's going to mean in terms of our hours in class and this, that, and the other. You still have to give him credit for that information. Beginning writers don't understand that the reader, listener, or viewer is not listening or reading or viewing in order to see that attribution. But if they don't hear or see that attribution, that bothers them because they're not sure who's talking. And they want to be sure that they know who's talking. So if you have he said, she said, Bennett said, Bennett said, Bennett said, Bennett said at the end of every one of your sentences, it's okay. It's better. They did studies on this kind of thing. They know that when you're listening to a news report, you almost don't even hear the he said, she said, that kind of thing, okay? The same is true when you're reading. When you're reading through it, you don't see it, but you would miss it if it was gone. And what happens, pardon me, what happens a lot of times in reading anyway, is that you go, wait a minute, who's that talking? Let me go back and look. You don't have that privilege or that ease with rediscovering who's talking in television and radios. You'd have to go back and either rewind, or you'd have to go to the website and listen to it later, or something along those lines. So you want to attribute the information that's being used in your news story at least once a paragraph, and more often if it's necessary to show who's talking, okay? Partial quotes are used when you only need a part of the quotation. And there's some pretty good reasons to do that. Let's say that someone says something outrageous, but they don't say it in a complete sentence. They just say, protest, let's go, protest. You may want to put the simple words protest in quotation marks and attribute it to the source of it, just to show that that was a way that this person fired up the crowd that he was talking to or she was talking to. I'll give you an example. One time years ago, they opened a chicken processing plant up in Moselle, Mississippi, called Southern Hens. Okay, at Southern Hens, they took spent hens. Okay, that was the quote. We use spent hens to process into other things. Okay, now what does it mean when your money is spent? Yeah, it's gone. You don't have any more. Okay, what is a hen? What do hens do?
They lay eggs.
Yeah, they're girl chickens and they lay eggs. At some point in their life, they are no longer able to lay eggs. So if they are a spent hen, that means that they are a hen that is no longer laying eggs, or they are a hen that is no longer laying eggs, that is skinny and can't be used as something in the refrigerator case at your grocery store. Okay, instead you use them for parts. You use them for chicken strips and chicken nuggets and makeup and things like that. Okay, so that's what Southern Hens was doing with the chickens that came into its facility. Well, that's kind of a quirky statement, spent hens, I thought that was a really cool way to describe what they were doing up there. So I used the partial quote, spent hens, as a way to explain what a spent hen was and how that came to be something that we might use in our own lives. Okay? All right, so those are the three kinds of quotes that you're going to need for your story. Attribution is giving credit for the information in your story to the person or the source that gave you that information. Okay, so if you go interview the mayor, you are going to say, according to, or said, Mayor Toby Barker, Hattiesburg Mayor Toby Barker. Okay, if you find something in a book, you're going to say, according to the book ABCs for Children, this is so. Okay, if you watch it on television, you're going to say, ABC News reported Tuesday, June the 2nd, that blah, 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 blah. If you get it off the internet, you're going to give credit to the website that it came from. And it probably needs to be the exact website that it came from. For example, if you wanted to get information off of the USM website about the School of Communication, you would need to go to usm.edu/School of Communication, or communication, I'm sorry, is what our website is, okay? And then maybe if you wanted internship information, you'd have to scroll down and go to student services and go to internships, and then you would find the information on the internships, okay? So you need to get direct with that, because if you call up usm.edu and expect to see something about the School of Communication, we may have done something important and it's on the homepage that particular day, but it's not a given, okay? So you've got to be sure that you are going straight to the attribution, that people can look that up and think about, okay? Now, we're supposed to say, you know, he said, she said, they said, we said. Well, you can't say they said and we said, because you have to give individual attribution. The word is said, S-A-I-D. It is not says. It is not exclaimed. It is not shouted. It is not cried. It is said. Stated is not correct either. But again, readers, listeners, and viewers don't hear it and don't see it. But when they see exclaimed, they think, well, now that doesn't sound right. He's not the excitable type. How could he exclaim something? You know? So if you use the word said, it is generic enough and it tells exactly what happened. Someone said something, okay? So that's the word you should use for attribution. And you should always use so-and-so said. Why? Because that is subject-verb agreement. Mayor Toby Barker said, Maggie Williams, a journalism professor at the University of Southern Mississippi, said, not said Toby Barker, Hattiesburg mayor, said Maggie Williams, a University of Southern Mississippi journalism professor, okay? So you put it in the order that it is most used, subject and verb, okay? Follow that? Okay, so you got to attribute. You've got to put the punctuation inside the quotation marks if you're using direct quotes or partial quotes for that matter. You've got to be sure that now, one of the things that I see a lot in the stories that people write is I'll see Hattiesburg mayor, comma, Toby Barker, comma, said blah, 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 blah. When you are using Hattiesburg mayor as part of Toby Barker's name, which there you are because you're trying to identify that person as to why he or she might have the best information for your story, you don't need any commas, okay? That is not an interrupter. Hattiesburg mayor becomes part of Toby Barker's overall name. So Hattiesburg mayor Toby Barker said Tuesday, comma, open quotes, I'm going to resign, period, in quotes. You see what I'm saying? Follow that? Okay. Let's see. You need to state your attribution at least once per paragraph, and the reason for that is so that everybody can keep up with what's going on. You do need quotes in your story. I would suggest the first few times that you go out and interview somebody that you take some kind of recording device with you. Now, I will caution you about that because the statistics show that it takes about 1.5 times as long to transcribe a tape as it does to listen to it the first time, okay? So if you don't, if you're working right smack on deadline, you better just really get going on your notes. And you've got good experience taking notes because that's what you've been doing in class for the last 12 years, okay? Or 13 years or 14 or whatever it is. Write this down, whether you're writing down anything else or not, but write this down. There is no such thing. There is no such thing as a good one source story. There is no such thing as a good one source story. Why? What happens when you only have one source?
It lacks perspective.
Yeah, you have one side of the story and that's all. Okay. Now, let's say that they're going to have a parade down Hardy Street on Tuesday of next week. Everybody is invited. It's to celebrate the end of the pandemic. It's we're going to have marching bands. We're going to have twirlers. We're going to have singers. We're going to have everybody that comes is going to get $5. Okay, so everybody that comes. Now, what in the world is wrong with that? You know, you might have to search around something for a while, but you're going to find somebody who's going to say, good grief, can't they do these parades someplace else? Because Hardy Street is a major place to drive, and that's going to tie up traffic for 2 whole hours. Okay, grumpy, grumpy, grumpy. That may be the only person in the whole city who's not in favor of getting $5 for going to attend a parade. But you've got to look around for that other source. And if you write a one source story, A, I will give you a 0 on it, and B, it will only have one perspective. Okay? So just don't do it. Do not do it. Those of you who are going into PR, a lot of times this is what you're supposed to do. That's a little bit different because you are trying to reach a specific public, and it might be that that specific public only needs to hear from one source in order for it to make sense. For any other kind of story, though, it has to have more than one source. Okay? All right. Usually human sources bring life to story because they emote. You know, you never know when you go to talk to somebody if they're going to sit there like this with their hands held in front of them and look scared as a rabbit. Okay, or if they're going to relax and they're going to tell you all kinds of extra stuff that you don't know and that you need to know. Okay, you never know what you're going to get from an interview totally, so you have to be careful. Now, there are 2 kinds of quotes that we need to talk about here real quickly. One is called a running quote. Okay, let's say that President Trump comes on the television and he makes a speech, and we want to use much of his speech as a direct quote in our story. Okay, a little tip, usually more than 2 paragraphs, people stop reading. Okay, so you probably want to keep it to at least, to the most, 2 paragraphs. But you're typing along and you're typing your story, and you get to that 3rd line, because remember, we're doing short sentences and short paragraphs, right? Okay, so you're typing along and you get to that 3rd line and you realize, I might better start wrapping this up, but he's still got something else to say that I want to include here. The way that you do that is you would simply put a period at the end of the last sentence in the 1st paragraph. You've said, blah, 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 comma, close quotes. President Donald J. Trump said Wednesday, period, open quotes, blah, 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 blah. Oh, and here's some more. Okay, we're going to go to the next paragraph for this. So we're just going to put a period at the end of that 2nd sentence. We're not going to close the quotes, and we're sending a message to our audience that Donald Trump is still talking. Okay, so we go to the next paragraph, we open quotes, we blah 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 blah, period or comma, close quotes, Trump said. You see what I'm saying? So you're running the quote over a paragraph long. And so instead, to divide it up, you're going to make it into 2 separate paragraphs, but you don't have to attribute again until the end of the 2nd paragraph. Does that make sense? Okay, so that's what we call a running quote. The other type of quote that sometimes gives students trouble is what's called bumping quotes. Okay, I'm interviewing students on the University of Southern Mississippi campus about what color rain boots they have. Okay, because everybody knows that when it rains outside, you want those rain boots so your feet don't get wet, right? But nobody says, oh, everyone must wear gold and black um, rain boots every time it rains to show support for USM. No, that's not what happens. You pick out the rain boots that you like. Some of them have little animals on them. Some of them are blue. Some of them are pink. Some of them are black. Some of them do have gold and black and gold on them, but you know, they don't have to. Okay. So I'm interviewing a bunch of people about what color their rain boots are. And I found 3 people who have the exact same type of rain boot. And I want to know why that happened. So I talk to them and I say, you know, you 3 ladies over here, or you 3 gentlemen over here, all 3 have this brand and style of rain boots. Did you go buy them together? How did that happen? So we're having kind of a conversation here, right? And we're all about the same subject. But the problem comes in for print writing, at least. You can't just quote Sarah as saying something, and then Blair as saying something, and then Jadelia as saying something right in a row, because it might seem like Sarah's talking when it's really Blair, or Blair's talking when it's really Jadelia. You see what I'm saying? So when you have both quotes that come up next to each other in a story, you really need to transition between them. And the transition can be something simple like blah, 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 comma, Sarah Belk, comma, a junior public relations student at the University of Southern Mississippi said, period. Okay. Open quote, Blair buys, another PR student at USM agreed. Okay. It can be that simple. But what you've got to do is change the speaker. You see what I'm saying? In my 102 class, I used to use this one NPR interview. John Boehner used to be the Republican Speaker of the House. Okay, and this was when Obama was president. And there was kind of a love-hate relationship between Boehner and Obama. They liked each other and they respected each other, but they were in opposite parties, and they often didn't agree. And so there was this one NPR story where they were going back and forth at each other. And amazingly, Obama and Boehner sounded enough alike, and the NPR people did not attribute. So it was hard to tell who was saying what and whether they were agreeing or disagreeing. Okay. If you're on television and I'm interviewing Zach over here first, we're going to put his face on television, and he's going to be talking, and we're going to have a little super down on his shirt that says Zach, whatever your last name is, I've forgotten right now. Okay. So people are going to be able to know that. And then if we change to Sarah, they're going to be able to see that Sarah and Zach are different genders, and that they don't look alike, and they don't talk alike. And so you're going to be able to see that. So you don't necessarily have to do that in television. But for writing and for purposes where it might become blurry as to who's talking, you do need to transition between 2 quotes to be sure that everybody knows who's doing the talking. Okay? Follow that? Okay. Now, when you go to interview someone, here's what you do. Number 1, you identify yourself. Hello, my name is Maggie Williams. I work for XYZ news organization. I am wanting to talk to you today about XYZ because I've been told that you are an expert on XYZ. Okay, so you're identifying yourself. One of the ethical things we'll talk about in a week or more when we talk about ethics is, you know, if you lie to people and don't tell them what you're doing, and then they turn their television on and they see that you were secretly recording them, sometimes they aren't very happy about that. And guess what? You've blown a source, because you probably won't ever be able to go back and talk to those people again. So the first thing you have to do is, when you are interested in doing an interview with someone, call them up, send them an email, whatever the case may be. And you say to them, here's who I am, here's who I'm working for, here's what I want to talk about. Would you be willing to meet with me Wednesday at 10 a.m., or whatever? Or is there a time today that we might could get together and talk about this subject? Okay, so you following that? That's the first thing you've got to do, is be sure that you identify yourself. Okay, let's talk about you for a minute here. And I do this every time I teach this class, mainly so that people will have heard it at least once before they get out of college. Okay, if you're going to be in this business, you have to do things like take a bath, brush your teeth so that you don't have bad breath, wear appropriate clothing now, and we'll talk about what appropriate clothing is in a minute, and present yourself as someone who is professional. Okay, now when you're working for the student prince at the on the USM campus, and you're going between classes to interview a professor or a secretary or someone of that sort, or the president even, they understand that, you know, you're a student in the middle of class. So you're cool there. When you are become a sports writer and you're going to interview the coach on the sidelines of practice, you don't have to wear heels and hose, okay, or a three-piece suit, because you'd be out of place there, okay? When you go to interview the mayor, it's probably a real good idea to put on a collared shirt and a pair of khaki or black pants. That's a good uniform to have in your closet, just because it looks neat. It's acceptable as business casual. And, you know, if you're going to a formal meeting where everybody's going to have on a suit and tie or hose and heels, you probably ought to do that too. Okay. But the point is, you can't smell bad. You can't have bad breath. If you smoke, you need to be careful, because you know that the odor will linger with you. Some people are really sensitive to that. We used to have a secretary in the journalism department who scents, SCENTS, made her sick. And so she would come to your door, but she would stand outside your door. I had a really small office. It used to be the first office I had when I joined the department was a closet. I watched them move the closet things out of there and put a desk in there. So I know it was a closet before they gave it to me as an office. I have a bigger office now, but I didn't at that time. She would stand outside my door because she would tell me that my perfume offended her. Not that it smelled bad, but that it bothered her allergies. And so she would stand, 2 or 3 feet outside my door and talk to me from there. That was fine. I mean, we're social distancing now. I worked with a man at the Hattiesburg American when I worked in the newspaper business, who every morning walked into the newsroom looking like he just stepped off the pages of GQ magazine. He was an impeccable dresser. He also bathed in his cologne, so you could smell him when he hit the back door of the building. Okay, offensive odors, body odor, sweat, stuff like that, and good odors, sometimes, there may not be a whole lot of difference between the two, okay? Moderation is the key. If you want to wear cologne, that is perfectly fine, but don't bathe in it. If you don't want to wear cologne, you should take a bath with a soap that has a good smell to it, or that has good properties to it. You should wear deodorant. I used to work with a woman who was really big into environmental issues. Okay, so she spent 3/4 of her time outside. She did not believe in deodorant. She said that was putting chemicals on her body, and she did not believe in it. And she also didn't believe in air conditioning. So by the middle of the afternoon, she smelled pretty ripe, no matter when the last time was she had had a bath. So you got to, this is grown-up stuff, y'all. You got to do that. If you are clumsy, like I am, and someone offers you a cup of coffee or a glass of water or something like that, and you're very likely to tip it over and spill it all over yourself or all over your the table that you're sitting at or whatever, I would suggest staying away from coffee or water or whatever, just because you don't. It's an accident waiting to happen. Um, take your pen. If your pen runs out of ink, it is perfectly fine to ask the person if you could borrow a pen or a pencil from them. But, you're a reporter now. Take 2 or 3 pens and always keep that pencil in case it starts to rain. You should be courteous. We live in the South. Yes, ma'am, and no, ma'am, no, sir, and yes, sir are part of our lexicon. That's a good thing. Okay, being polite to people is a good way to get a good interview and to get an interview and to get a second interview with someone. Being on time is also something that is important in the interview business. If your appointment is at 10 o'clock with Mr. Big Shot, you should arrive at 10 minutes till 10 o'clock. Okay, you should be waiting on him. He should not be waiting on you. Okay, when I was in the newspaper business, everybody always wanted to be on TV. They wanted the newspaper there because they wanted the physical copy that they could put in their scrapbook. But they wanted all their friends to say, "I saw you on television last night," and you understand that. I mean, that's kind of a thrill of being a newsmaker. Okay. But the news team that I worked with for the most part never could get anywhere on time. If the news conference started at 9 o'clock, they showed up at 10 after, and of course they had all this equipment with them that they had to set up. Be on time, be early, be prompt. Okay. Before you go to any interview, do whatever homework you can. Find out who this person is. Google them. It may be that this person has been a frequent contributor to the news that your organization has covered. So you may have some paper copies or some video copies that you can get an idea of what kind of person this is. If you are afraid that you are not going to be able to think on your feet, I would suggest writing down a list of questions that you have to have answered for your story. Okay. Don't confine yourself to that list of questions, because there may be other things that come up during the interview that you may want to keep as part of talking to this person. But give yourself a list of questions to start with. Sometimes there's that one question that you have to ask, or else there's no reason for your story. And that's always the one that I forget to ask if I don't have it written down. Okay, so make a list. Make sure that you know going into the interview what the purpose of the interview is. Sometimes you'll get an assignment and they'll say, go talk to Susie Q down at City Hall and find out what's going on. And that's all you've got to go on. If you can, do a little bit of investigation to kind of find out what it is you're getting yourself into, because otherwise you may be completely lost the whole interview. Okay, so I strongly encourage you to do your interview in person at least the first couple of times that you talk with somebody. A lot of students these days will email me questions. I'm doing a story on internships. Can I email you 3 or 4 questions to answer? And I'll write back and say, no, you come over here and talk to me, because you know what I could do? You email me a list of questions. I have an assistant sitting over here. She's 20 years old. She mainly does her homework, but I can't be bothered with your questions, so I'm going to give it to her to do. Now, is that a good source? I know that Dr. Bennett is busy. I know that Jim Call does a lot of his interviews for him. That's the head of communication at USM. But if you're in the same room with that person, or on a call like this where you can see that person and see that mouth moving and that kind of thing, you're going to get a much better interview and a much more in-depth look at things. Okay. All right. If it's not possible to interview someone in person, use something like Zoom or Skype or something along those lines, just because, again, it lets them see you and you see them. When you make the appointment, pick a good place to have the interview. Okay. It may sound like a really great idea to have lunch with somebody and talk over lunch, but you know what happens at restaurants? Other people talk too. And so sometimes it gets kind of noisy in there. And sometimes that cannot be the best place to carry on a conversation. Or if you're interviewing somebody who's really popular in the town that you live in or in the area that you are covering, what can happen is that everybody that comes in the restaurant wants to talk to that person. Hey, Mayor, how you doing? Let me shake your hand. I got to talk to you about something for a minute. You know, pick the best place. Take a look around you. You know, if you go to somebody's office and you see that they are, you know, that they have everything meticulously lined up on their desk, that tells you something about what kind of person they are. If you see that all over the walls there are pictures of them with political figures or celebrities or whatever, that tells you something about the people. If you see that they have pieces of construction paper with a bunch of scribbling on it, that tells you that they got kids, you know? So look around and kind of take note of your surroundings. That's a good way to make sure that you are getting the full picture of who that person is. Be sensitive to your source. You know, maybe your job is to go and interview the family of the murder victim that was found earlier this week. They're not going to be on their best, you know, they're not going to be happy. They're going to want you to get the story because it's important to them that people know about their child. But they're probably they might cry some. They might lose their composure sometimes, you know. You've got to be ready for that, and you've got to be able to cope with that. I used to work with a woman who was absolutely brilliant in those situations. When she saw someone at a scene of an accident or something who was losing it, was getting upset, she would take that person off to the side, find some water or something, let them sit down, find some water, and she would shoo people off. Now, sometimes she got an exclusive that way because she was, you know, making sure that that person was all right. But your sensitivity to your source is going to pay off for you in that interview. Trust me. Okay, so take note of your surroundings. Be a good listener. When we watch television these days, we see the reporters breaking into, you know, interrupting people and taking over the conversation sometimes. That's not what you're there to do. You are there to get the information. And so you need to ask questions. Now, I've been in interviews before where with colleagues who walked in and turned on their microphone and said, okay, talk. You've got to ask the questions. You just got to. That's what you got. That's what you're there for. But you also have to listen, and you have to listen well. And what you can do by listening is that as there are those pauses that sometimes happen in a conversation, you can say, and then what happened? Or can you go on a little bit further? Can you tell us a little bit more about how that happened? You know, you can add small bits to the conversation that don't interrupt the flow of information. Okay? If you don't know, ask. If you don't know how to spell someone's name, ask them. I suggest that you ask them every time anyway. The very time that you don't ask Bob Smith how to spell his name, he will spell it Bobbsmythe. Okay? So I would always ask, can I be sure that I have the proper spelling of your name and your title? Sometimes they'll hand you a business card. That's even better. You've got it written down there. A lot of times people have several titles. They have several hats that they wear and the job that they do. Your job is to pick the one that is most connected to the information that you are getting from them. Okay, so you can say Mayor of Hattiesburg, who also in his spare time plays the guitar. Okay, so you're showing the relationship between the source and the story that you are doing. Get the quotes and get them right. If there used to be a women's basketball coach at USM, and she was from the South, but she talked a mile a minute. I mean, just and ran her sentences all together. And this, I used to sit in the middle of the sports section, so the kids, the guys that were doing the sports reporting there would always say to whoever was going to talk to Coach James, take a recorder. She talks too fast. Take a recorder. You'll never keep up. You know, so you have to be sure that you can, if somebody is talking really fast, they may be a little nervous first and foremost, but if they're talking really fast, what you have to do sometimes is say, I'm sorry, I missed that. Can you say that again, please? You know, did you kill your wife? Did you just say that you killed your wife? I think you did, but I missed it because I wasn't, you were talking so fast I couldn't, you know, I couldn't quite get that down. Could you tell me that again? Okay. So be sure that if you don't know, ask. And there's no such thing as a stupid question. I mean, I don't care how many times people roll their eyes at you. There's no such thing as a stupid question. If you don't know it, you need to know it for your story. You need to ask. Okay. Let's see. You need to maintain control of the interview. I've listened to reporters before say things like, so-and-so, just talk about what happened here yesterday. Okay. What you are doing in doing that is you are giving control of the interview to the source. You are no longer in the driver's seat here. You are being driven. And they can go off on these bunny trails. They can ignore your question altogether. There's a really famous interview when Sarah Palin was running for vice president when she was tapped by John McCain to be his running mate. And Katie Couric had a, who used to be on the Today Show and now is working with Yahoo News, I think. And maybe she's got Katie Couric Media going by now. I'm not quite sure what her story is these days. But she's a really gifted interviewer, and she was a very popular reporter in those days. And so she went to talk to Sarah Palin, who knew she was coming and who knew that she had just done a couple of controversial things and that Katie Couric was likely to ask her about them. And Katie Couric did. And Sarah Palin said, well, you know, I don't want to talk about that today. And Katie Couric said, well, I'm sorry you don't want to talk about it, but that's what people are talking about. So we're going to either talk about it or I'm going to keep asking the question the whole way through this interview. You know, you have to maintain control of the conversation or else your source will take it away from you and all of a sudden it becomes the Sarah Palin show. It does not become a news story. It becomes a propaganda piece or a public relations piece, or whatever the case may be, and you don't want that for the news. Remember that accuracy and fairness are the hallmarks of any good news story. You want to get the information and you want to get it right. I once was asked to sit in on an interview that a colleague was doing with a man who was on the school board, and he and the superintendent, he was president of the school board at the time, and he and the superintendent hated each other. I mean, they made no secret of it. They hated each other. Well, the man worked for a company and he was being transferred, so he was leaving town. So she said, I want to make sure that he answers this question. So she asked me to sit in on the interviews to be sure that she was hearing things well. She asked him 5 different times what it was about the superintendent that really got under his skin. She asked it 5 different ways, but she asked him 5 different times the same question to be sure he answered it the same way each time. When you're dealing with controversy, that's something that you might want to consider doing, asking your question multiple times to be sure you're getting the same answer because you want to be accurate. For this class, you're going to want to quote people by their name, their full name, President Donald J. Trump, okay? Their connection to the story, who is currently President of the United States, and any other titles that they might hold that might have any kind of influence on it. If you're talking to students, you want to say, Jane Doe, 19, a junior biology major from Lafayette, Louisiana. Okay, so you want to be sure that we know that she is a student at USM and she is at this level in her learning, and she is this kind of major. Okay. Trouble spots in interviewing. Trouble spots are things like children. Okay. Children will talk your ear off until you put a microphone in front of their face or you ask them a direct question. And then all of a sudden they become the shyest, even the most vivacious kid turns into a little turtle and wants to just go behind mama's legs. It is good to get down on their level. In other words, kneel down on the floor, sit down in a little chair next to them at the table, and talk to them eye to eye, so that they can see that you are interested in them. And of course, you're going to have to simplify, and you're going to have to ask the questions in ways that their little minds can understand. Okay. When you are let's say you go to the city council meeting. Okay. You got 5 city council members in Hattiesburg. You probably got more in some of the cities that y'all are in. And then you've got the mayor, and you've got the lawyer for the city council, and you've got the clerk of the city council. Okay, so there's 8 different people in that room, and all of them could be talking at one time or another during the course of the conversation that day. When I did stuff like that, what I would do is, when I walked in, I would give everybody a number. I would write down, Mayor Toby Barker, number 1. District 1 or Ward 1 councilperson Jeffrey George, number 2. Ward 2 councilperson Deborah Delgado, number 3. And so when I would be in my notes and Deborah Delgado would say something, instead of writing her name down, I'd write down number 3, so I'd know that quote was attributed to her. Okay. That's just one way that you can do it. Another way you can do it is with a recording, but be careful, because those people may sound alike, when you get back and start listening to what they're saying. So be careful that you can tell them apart. If you are part of a news conference, let's say you're going to the president's news conference today, or the governor's news conference. The governor of Mississippi is holding a news conference every day at 2:30, I think it is. When you go to that news conference, it's not just your questions that you're going to get answers to. It's also other reporters' questions that you're going to get answers to as well. And you have the right to use that information as long as it's in the open news conference. So if you ask a question and the person who's answering questions answers it, everybody in the room has the benefit of that question. Okay. Sometimes reporters will hang behind at the end because they want to talk directly to that source and get them on camera or get them on tape saying something. You can do that too if you want to. Sometimes the person is really busy and they don't have time to stay behind. So you better start asking your questions if you want them answered. Avoid 2-part questions. Mr. Mayor, what are you going to have for lunch today, and why did you yell at the reporter in the City Hall yesterday? Which question is he going to answer of those 2? I'm thinking I'm going to have tuna for lunch today. That's what I'm going to have for lunch today. Next, that's what happens when you ask 2-part questions. So if you've got a 2-part question, the best way to deal with it is to say, I have a redirect after I ask this question. Did you kill your wife? Answer the question. No, of course not. Why do people think you killed your wife? You see what I'm saying? So if you've got a 2-part question, ask permission to ask the both of the questions. Short questions are best. If you have to explain it to them, they're not a good source. Okay. I read a story one time that a student turned in, and it was in the olden golden days of WUSM, because I'm real old and I've been around a real long time, okay? In those days, WUSM played only classical music most of the day, okay? And so very few people at the University of Southern Mississippi listened to WUSM. A lot of offices had it on in the background over the speakerphone and all that, or the microphone or something like that. But very few students or whatever knew about WUSM because they didn't want to listen to it, okay? So this person interviewed the manager of WSM and knew good and well that could not turn that story in without at least 2 more live sources. But he couldn't find anybody who had ever listened to the station, okay? So he quoted 2 random people on campus. John Doe, an anthropology major from Jackson, said, quote, "I've never listened to WUSM, but I think it's great that we have a radio station on campus." Okay? Sometimes you're going to have to look to get those extra sources, okay? Be sure that you are getting sources that are 3 things. Knowledgeable, in other words, they know about the topic. Credible, they have credentials that show that they know about that topic. How do you get credentials? You study it or you live it, okay? And 3, reliable. You do not want to quote somebody in a news story and have them turn around the next day and say, "I never said that. I'm not like that. That is not my way of life at all." You want somebody who's going to stick to their guns. And sometimes when you're dealing with controversy, people say stupid things. A colleague of mine went to listen to the sheriff talk one time years ago, and the sheriff said something just out and out stupid. And she said to herself, "That's stupid. That's going to get him in trouble." But she quoted him as saying it anyway because every news organization there was going to use that, and she could not run the risk of not having that information in her story. Okay? Okay. Let's see. We're out of time. Go through the PowerPoint that is on your page and look at that so that you can so that you can see pretty much the rest of my lecture here. I do want to talk before we leave about on the record and off the record real quickly. But if you've got questions, once you go through those 2 PowerPoints, that'll help get us started tomorrow. Let's see, what else? Let's talk about off the record, on the record. When you go to interview somebody, the assumption is that they know that it is on the record. And that means that anything that happens during that interview, any words that are said, any questions that are answered, any actions that are caught on tape, any of that sort of thing is usable by the news media for reporting that story. Okay, so that's what on the record means. When you're in a town like a Hattiesburg or a small town, a lot of times people are not very media savvy. When you go to New York or New Orleans or New Jersey, any of those places, they're going to know what a camera means and they're going to know what a microphone in their face means. Okay, sometimes you have to educate people about what on the record means. Okay, sometimes you will have people who you'll ask a question: "Did you kill your wife?" And the source will look at you and they'll say, "You know, Zach, I like you. Can we go off the record for a minute?" Okay, now what that means is they're asking you to put your pen down, turn your recording device off, and not use what they're fixing to tell you in your news story, okay? That's dangerous. It's dangerous for a couple of reasons. Number one, once you go off the record, sometimes there's not a clear path back to the record, okay? So you're sitting there and 10 minutes ago, the mayor told you it was off the record, but we never went back on the record. But now you've been asking him questions for 10 minutes. and you're not sure whether you can use them or not. Okay. Again, you've given control of the interview to somebody, to the source, instead of keeping it for yourself. Okay. So you are, you need to be sure that you're on the record once you go off the record, if you choose to do that. I had a colleague once who when people would say, let's go off the record, he would not say anything, and he would just sit there with his arms crossed, but he'd leave his recording devices on, and he had a good memory, so he would remember what was said. And what would happen is that he'd go back and write his story as if there was never an off-the-record request made. I started realizing why his resume looked like somebody who was running from creditors. Every 18 months to 2 years, no one would talk to him anymore because he was using off the record material. So you have to be careful with off the record. Sometimes when you get into bigger areas, you will have someone who provides information for background only. For example, if you become a national reporter, and you go to the White House, a lot of times before Donald Trump comes out and says what he has to say, they will send in a secretary or an assistant or an aide or someone like that who's going to give background, so that Donald Trump doesn't have to get down in the nitty-gritty and explain to you how this happened. Okay? You just get to ask the questions from there. So the background only is usually okay, because these are lower level people in the organization who are simply bringing you up to date. Those of you who are going into PR, you will be doing backgrounders for a lot of the companies and clients that you have. What that means is that you will have stock material ready for your audience to take, usually in written form or on a website somewhere that you can refer them to, so that they can get the history of the company, or the principal directors of the company, or things of that sort. Okay. Sometimes you will have someone tell you something and they will say, look, I'm going to give you this information and you can use it, but you can't attribute it to me. Okay. One time I was interviewing a guy who was running for school board, and he said to me, he said, look, don't quote me as saying this, but we heard through the grapevine last night that my opponent is going to drop out of the race. I said, is that so? And he said, yeah. So I tried to call the opponent before I wrote this story. I could not reach that person. So instead, in the story, I quoted, someone close to the campaign said Tuesday that John Doe plans to drop out of the race for school board. Doe could not be reached for comment. Okay. All right. So those are the different kinds of things that you may run into as you're out there in the reporting world. Now we will stop here today, and we will pick up here tomorrow and talk about breaking news and how that happens and all that sort of thing. Anybody got any questions before we say goodbye today? Remember that you've got an interview okay. The interview homework is 4 YouTube videos of interviews, okay? You will watch each of those videos and you will answer the questions that are part of that assignment, okay, for each one of the different videos, okay? And be honest. I mean, some of it's asked for your opinion on things too, so be honest about how you feel about those interviews, okay? Don't forget, between 6 and 7 tonight is the time that you're to take the first AP style test. You'll take your second one tomorrow between 6 and 7. Okay. If you have a problem with that time, send me an email, let me know, give me a call, whatever works best for you, so that we can fix that for you. But I'd really prefer for everybody to do it at the same time if we possibly could. Okay. And so otherwise we're done for today. Thanks for coming. Thanks for putting up with Davies. He's helpful most of the time. I like him, and you know, he's fun to have around. If you've got questions about anything else, let me know. Send me your blog address and your Twitter handle. Look for that questions list on your under frequent items, and we'll go from there. Okay. Questions, comments, concerns? Okay, I think this worked pretty well. Did it? Didn't it? Everybody hear everything? Okay, and we've got a recording of it just in case you missed parts and you want to go back and review it. I do think that it takes some firepower on your computer. That these come out as MP4s, so it may take some firepower on your computer to re-listen to it, but I'll make it available to you as soon as I get it. Okay. All right, now I'll see you tomorrow. Thanks for coming.